Hope everyone's well today. Sorry I've not posted for a while. Absolutely roasting again today. Just on my late afternoon, early evening walk, stroll down the canal. Hope you can hear me actually. One of the reasons I've not posted, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, my knee is I'm having good and bad days with it, so I've just got to, I'm not doing as much walking as I'd like. Number two is there's just been this nagging wind, even though it's been so hot for the last couple of weeks. And before that it was quite warm. It's been dry for so long, apart from a couple of thunderstorms. But there's just been this constant wind all the time for weeks now. And we've got it again today. So obviously that's another reason as well, because I like to do these videos outside. So you can have a look at the countryside whilst I'm rabbiting on, whatever I'm rabbiting on about. So I'll tell you what I'm going to rabbit on about today. And I think there's something that's happened in the last few days in the UK just really demonstrates the level of madness and hysteria and insanity that has certainly gripped the establishment and the mainstream media, but also parts of the population. And it's to do with Boris Johnson and the fanatical obsession about him and the ousting of him. Now, I've got no time for Boris Johnson. I've got no time for a man who presided over the demise of a once great country, who shut down the economy, who ordered lockdowns, who eulogised a certain medical procedure and propagandised his citizens into getting said medical procedure. But the thing is about Boris Johnson, as bad as he is, and he's a prick, he's less bad than many of the other protagonists out there in this pantomime, because that's what it is. Albeit this pantomime is a bloodthirsty pantomime. It's all acted out, it's all scripted. Everyone's got a part to play, but sadly in this pantomime people suffer terribly. People die at the hands of Big Pharma and Big State. But Boris Johnson is somewhat a thorn in the side of the deep state. Not totally on side, in the same way that Donald Trump isn't. And again, I've not got any time for Trump. You know, Operation Warp Speed, you know, that's sealed it for me. Up until then, I quite liked him. But no. However, these two characters, and this shows how deranged the establishment is, in that they can't tolerate any characters at all who aren't completely on message with everything, you know, from lockdowns to jobs, to net zero, to Ukraine, to critical race theory, to all the other insanity that's going on at the moment, multi-layered madness. And it's just really got me thinking about, and this is what I always return to when I do these videos. I tend not to talk so much about politics and politicians. I am broadly of that view that they are all broadly the same: sellouts, weak, careerists, ambitious, ruthless, not particularly intelligent, and lacking in moral, or sometimes completely absent of any moral, you know, centeredness. I'm more interested, and I always say this, in society and how the effects of politics plays out in society, how people are still so subservient, so reliant, so engrossed in these political pantomimes and these political stories. And stories hold sway over us. Stories are They provide the backdrop and the motivation for people. We are stories, we love stories, we need stories, and the media are expert at providing stories for people to take part in, to feel part of, and to ultimately feel righteous and virtuous, because in the media's story there's always a good guy and a bad guy. There's always the right side to be on and the wrong side to be on, and there's a certain group of people, I believe is significant in number, that through them having been infantilised so much are unable to discern the stories that the media tells them, and are happy and content to be on the side of the majority that the media tells them is the virtuous side to be on. Now I'm going to try and just develop this a little bit more, because I hope I'm making sense, but maybe I'm not. So, you know, when I have some two young nephews and a young niece at the moment, and you know, often read them stories when I see them. It's quite interesting when you read a kid's story, you know, kids' stories that haven't been, again, propagandised and made degenerate by these depraved people who seem intent on destroying children. But that's not what this video is about. I'm talking about innocent stories, you know, stories maybe that I remember when I was a kid, stories that do have a moral to them, but do have a message behind them, and act as, I believe, as some kind of a bit of an introduction to children about the world. And it's interesting when I read these stories, because they're not overly simplistic, you know. There is some layers of complexity to them, not complexity, but some layers of nuance to them, in that you can see in many of them how the stories encourage the child to think about what's right and wrong. Many of them don't necessarily tell them what's right and wrong. You know, the characters, as basic as they are, and the things that they do, requires some level of interpretation in the child's mind, you know. What's so hot? And then as we grow older, what's supposed to happen is the more we are exposed to our world, the more we see of our world, the more we learn about ourselves and others, and interact with what's around us, and to take part in society as we, you know, grow up to go to school, go to whatever we do, some to university, get a job, play an active role, and be open to learning, be open-minded, try and be open-hearted, develop our value system, whatever it is, make mistakes, learn from our failures. You really do then. I think it was John Lennon who said something like, I'll probably butcher this now, the older I get, the less I understand, the more I see of the world, the less I understand. I think that was what he said. I'm not a massive fan of John Lennon, by the way, hypocrite, but I get what he's saying about yeah, the more you allow yourself to learn and to be exposed and to gain knowledge, the more you realise that you're really not wise at all. You're really not knowledgeable at all. And that's important to know that. Because to go back to these political stories, to these meta-narratives, these overarching, massive controlling narratives that relate to these things, particularly Boris Johnson in the UK, Donald Trump in the US, Brexit in the UK, COVID with lockdowns and jabs and everything that incorporated across the Western world, Ukraine and Russia, those things, and to a bit of a lesser extent, more so in America though, the critical race theory and the trans theory, which is starting to rear its ugly head in the UK, albeit I believe is coming up against some real proper opposition now. But let's focus on Ukraine, Russia, COVID, Trump, Boris Johnson and Brexit. I mean, you've got to ask yourself, right, if you're on this side of the establishment with all of the main issues of our time, would you not ask yourself, am I happy with that? You know, am I really, am I comfortable with the fact that I'm resonating deeply with what this deep state establishment is telling me? I mean, does history not tell us to be very dubious about, particularly when governments are big in size, particularly when they have such huge control? Does history not tell us that we need to be careful, be doubtful, be skeptical, be cynical? A lot of people don't understand this. And these simplistic stories, to go to Boris Johnson, it's like everything bad that's happened in the UK is on him. It's almost as if he's the only politician or the first politician who's ever lied. He's solely to blame for everybody's unhappiness. It's such infantile, simplistic, it's cop-out thinking. And there's a couple of elements to it. Number one, there is a basic human need for people to want to belong on the side of the majority. We've seen that obviously in the last few years. And number two is people need a scapegoat. Boris Johnson is people's scapegoat. Who are those people? People who can't critically think, who can't think, you know, who are unable to have any degree of intellectual honesty, who are narcissistic, I would suggest, deeply insecure, and enslaved to stories, enslaved to systems, lacking in meaning and belonging in their lives and purpose in their lives. It is those people who believe hook, line and sinker what they're told. They don't really ever look to try and find the grey areas, to find the nuance, to listen to the other side of the argument, to maybe explore whether the politicians and public figures that they identify with, that they support and they think that are right, whether they're not, you know, whether there's anything that's that they need to look at. There's such, we live in times of such ineptitude when it comes to dialogue, conversation and debate amongst so many. Oh, it's nice that. I think this is an oak tree. Just look at this. I'll just break off for a minute. I think someone can tell me, is that an oak tree? I think it is. You can see behind me here. I mean, look at that. And I hope you can hear me okay, by the way, because this wind is unabating, very hot. What I don't understand, well, I understand partially. I understand partially once people are being propagandised to and indoctrinated and brainwashed to such a degree. I partially understand why they are as they are, why you cannot have a conversation with people where you stray 1 millimetre, 1 iota from what they have been programmed to think by their media. Now, of course, going back to Boris Johnson, he'll never be forgiven for Brexit. You know, Brexit was an act of defiance by the British people. It really was. And I did a video a few months ago actually, predictions for 2023. I said they're going to try and spin this long COVID thing to cover up for the you-know-what. They're going to try and get us into World War III with Russia. The good news is, I don't think they were really able to sell that to people in the West en masse. And they were going to do their best to up the Brexit rhetoric with a view ultimately to try to usher the UK somehow back into at least into the orbit of the EU, if not full membership, with a Keir Starmer Labour government. Well, that's happening. You know, and it's so obvious it's happening. The rhetoric that's being stepped up on Brexit. I mean, two ways, you'll already know this, to to get a flavour of propaganda is, you Google pretty much anything to do with Google Trump, Boris Johnson, Brexit, Ukraine, Russia, climate change or COVID, and you see the results that come up. They'll all be parroting the establishment view. There'll be no balance there. There won't be. And it's indicative of the level of control of these narratives that the establishment does have. I can't remember what I was going to say then. I'm getting a bit hot here. Yeah, so Brexit, yes. Are we really expected to believe, are we, that Boris Johnson is the arch enemy of the British people? Well, he is an arch enemy of mine. He's the arch enemy of the British people, and we're going to ignore the fact that that the very thing that he was accused of with this pathetic Partygate probe, that is pathetic, pitiful beyond words, that he was the only one who was breaking rules. He was the only high-ranking politician who was breaking the rules. Are we really meant to believe that? Are we really meant to believe that the UK was uniquely bad in its pandemic preparedness? Even though I have serious doubts whether there was a pandemic, as you know. Are we really supposed to believe that the UK is unique in its economic situation at the moment? Are we really supposed to believe that all the discord and disunity in the US is due to one man, Donald Trump? Are we really supposed to believe that Zelensky is a war hero? And are we really supposed to believe that the planet's going to expire and burst into flames in 5 minutes time? I mean, the world is mad, and it's unrelenting and incessantly mad. And I often think, and I think again I partially understand this, the foot soldiers who kind of like the influential foot soldiers of the regime. So think about, I don't know, to use two examples, think about someone like Alistair Campbell, a man upon whose lives hundreds of thousands of people, on whose lives hundreds of thousands of people's lives were lost, possibly millions, whose outright lies. And somebody like James O'Brien, who to my mind dedicates his whole life to spitting venom, to sowing seeds of disunity and hatred, division. These people are relentless and incessant. They seem to have boundless energy, and they do influence a significant number of people. And on the other, not the other side, well no, I would say I'm on the other side of the likes of those two characters. But I'm tired from the last few years, and I know lots of people are, because what we've been asked to do and what we have done, what we've taken on as we've gone up against these lies and this tyranny, and we've stood firm, often alone at the early stages, in the face of everything the establishment could throw at us, as we witnessed our friends and families turning into these zombies, automatons, incapable of even, sometimes they got to a point where they couldn't even utter any word. They were just coming out with slogans, weren't they? Anyway, thank God most of them have recovered some sanity now, which is great, but a lot of us are tired, aren't we? And I think the reason for that is because I genuinely believe that the people who stand up for things like freedom of speech and bodily autonomy and the right to exist in a world free from insidious propaganda, and who speak up on behalf of the oppressed, the genuinely oppressed, and who want to speak up and defend children, and who want to defend their country's values and their history and their culture and their customs, and who want to preserve some form of dignity for old people. These are all the things that we did. Well, I think you've got to be an empath. I think you're very sensitive if you do that, and I think you're brave. I'm not bigging myself up here at all. I'm not. What I'm saying though is I know I've got a big heart. I know that you know, you guys watching this on my YouTube channel, I know you're the same. Sensitive empaths who are strong, courageous, but who are tired because we're emotionally drained because we have emotions. But we live in a time where I believe there's a higher number of people now who are kind of devoid or have been robbed of emotions, basic human emotions, due to a combination of factors, you know, internet, social media, technology, AI and propaganda all combining, and you know, general lack of meaning and purpose in our world at the moment as we transcend these two eras, who don't really feel those emotions, who aren't empathetic, who they've demonstrated that they're not. I've seen it from various people, you know, who don't. And then the two characters that I mentioned before, you know, these media public influencers, public figures and media influencers and influencers of the narrative, who, you know, are put in place by the establishment to do exactly that, to propagandize people, to undermine people, to break people, to divide people, to make people believe the most ridiculous things. They're soulless, they're godless, they're wretched. They don't have respect, they don't have basic dignity, and of course their whole raison d'etre, as they say, is that they're the kind ones, they're the morally virtuous ones, they're the ones who want to heal our world. These are the ones who say they're on the right side of history, and that anyone who doesn't believe what they believe is on the wrong side of history. And it's so obvious to observe that Orwellian double think, that insidious but very stark propaganda that just comes out of their mouths every single day. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't pay any attention to them. I just keep a half eye on things every now and again. I've limited myself to what I expose myself to in terms of information for a long time now. But it's easier that way when you observe the overall view rather than getting into too much detail. But to go back to society, and why don't we have that good dialogue and good debate and good conversation? Well, it's because people have been manipulated psychologically for so long via information now. They've been divided. Have become ostracised, detached, disconnected, atomised from each other, from themselves, from nature. That basic ability to be able to sit and listen to somebody and then to be able to process what's been said and then come back and reflect a view back, either agreeing or disagreeing or everywhere in between, and then to pursue a conversation, try and find some common ground. Well, there's not many people who can do that anymore, you know, and it's easier for them to just fall in, to believe these tropes, to gaslight themselves, to be a victim of the gaslighting, to forego so much that is important simply to feel good, to feel like they're doing something. You know, they're driving an electric car, aren't they the good guys? You know, they've got a Ukrainian flag in their Twitter bio, aren't they the good guys? They went and got their jab to protect others, aren't they the good guys? They hate Boris Johnson, aren't they the good guys? They detest Trump, aren't they the good guys? You know, they're doing their thing for the planet, aren't they the good guys? You see, it probably gives them a nice warm feeling, doesn't it? You know, nice warm feeling. But really, they're bereft. And anybody who is, I know loads of people who've just been completely unwilling to engage on anything. There's a tiny Overton window with so many people where you can, you know, you feel comfortable in talking about various things, and so much that's just off the table. You know, that's intellectual bereftness, really, isn't it? It's it's cowardice in many ways, you know. And I'm going to do another video particularly about Brexit, because I think what's happening with that is very sinister. It doesn't surprise me at all. You know, predicted it a long time ago. We're 7 years since the Brexit vote now, and you know, the blob, the establishment, the civil service, whatever you want to call it, and all of the vast majority of the media and political class never did accept it, and it's resulted in, you know, democratically elected Prime Minister who got a majority of 80 seats, you know, Boris Johnson, from being ousted, not only as Prime Minister but as an MP. I mean, how could anyone seriously think that we've got a democracy in the UK? I mean, it's laughable, isn't it? It's absolutely laughable. I suppose it's all well and good though, isn't it? If you're just gonna go along with whatever, as long as you're comfortable, as long as you don't have to make any sacrifices, as long as you're financially okay, and as long as you've got a nice warm fuzzy feeling, what does democracy matter? What do basic human rights matter? You know, what does freedom matter? You know, you've got your convenient life with all your mod cons and comforts, and get everything at the click of a button. You've got your monthly salary coming in, or your monthly pension coming in. You're relatively well off. What does it matter? What does it matter? There's a lot of people in that category. Now, I don't know how many there are who are actively sabotaging the UK as an entity, as a country, as a society, who are actively sabotaging British people themselves, but I do know that over 6 million people tried to stop Brexit by signing a petition, and that's sizable, that, isn't it? Very, very sizable. But you never seem to encounter them though, which makes me think, how many of them are there now who are willing to actually go, I'll have a conversation with you about this and tell me what, I'm going to tell you why we should still be in the European Union. They cop out, don't they? Again, won't enter into a debate, but they will do things to consistently, insidiously undermine the process of democracy by signing these petitions, by, you know, relentlessly posting on social media, by just sowing discord in their lives and slagging off people who think differently to them and label them. And anyway, I'm probably going off on a little bit of a rant now. Don't know whether this has been one of my most articulate videos really, but my brain is a bit battered at the moment, I'll be honest with you. With one thing and another. Just like this barge go past as I come onto the canal. But anyway, do let me know what you think about what I've said in this video, particularly with regard to, you know, how these control narratives, how these stories hold sway over so many people, how and why so many cannot conceive of a reality different to that which they are being told. How infantilized is the general population? Where are we with regard to, you know, a regeneration and a renaissance of things like conversation and debate and ideas? Are there many people in your lives that you're able to have these conversations with? How many are still falling into these, you know, into these easy to participate in belief structures, etc., etc.? Do let me know. If you do like my content, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell as well, so that you don't miss any videos. I am going to do a couple of videos specifically on Brexit. I'll probably write some notes for this as well, simply because I think it's something that's just passing back, you know, it's just going on in the background here. Attempts to get the UK back into the European Union, and it worries me, that it really does. And I'm going to do a video, some content around Brexit and the fanatical Remainer movement. You know, these anti-democrat children who, you know, have such staunch views but won't engage in any respectful debate with people who voted for Brexit. So that's what we're going to do. Anyway, hope you're all well. Yeah, just coming up to half an hour now. Right, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna shut up talking now. Have a great rest of the day. Cheers.